I always knew my family saw me as the invisible one, the responsible daughter, the one who never caused trouble, never demanded attention, never complained. But I never imagined my own sister would try to kill me at the dinner table while our parents watched me choke and told me I was being dramatic. I can still feel it. The moment my throat began to close, the soup turning to poison in my mouth, my hands clawing at my neck as the air disappeared, and Ashley, my baby sister, the golden child, leaning close to whisper something so cruel, so calculated, that even now my hands shake when I remember it. She thought she had planned everything perfectly. The researched dosage, the stolen EpiPen, the family trained to dismiss my every cry for help. What she didn't expect was the one person in that room who finally stopped pretending not to see. One phone call. That's all it took to unravel 32 years of lies. Have you ever trusted someone with your life only to discover they were betting on your death? This is my story. My name is Kristen Bailey. I'm 35 years old, a senior financial analyst at a firm I've worked at for over a decade. I own my apartment, pay my own bills, and built my life from nothing but determination and silence. I am the eldest daughter, and in my family, that meant I was the one who disappeared. Growing up as the oldest child, I learned early that my role was to be responsible, reliable, and invisible. My younger sister, Ashley, arrived 3 years after me, and from that moment, the spotlight found its permanent home. Ashley was vibrant. Ashley was charming. Ashley needed things. And I was just there, at family dinners. No one asked about my promotion, or my work, or my life. The conversation always circled back to Ashley, her real estate listings, her marriage to Derek, her son. The fact that her income was inconsistent and our parents quietly supplemented her lifestyle was never discussed. The fact that I had succeeded completely on my own was never acknowledged. I existed in my family's peripheral vision, noticed only when they needed something. But the favoritism wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how they taught me to doubt myself. When I was 12 years old, I nearly died. A bowl of clam chowder at a restaurant sent me into full anaphylactic shock. I remember the terror, my throat closing, the world going gray, the ambulance sirens. I spent 3 days in the hospital. For years afterward, my family was careful. They checked ingredients. They asked questions. But slowly, gradually, that care eroded. My allergy became an inconvenience. Then an exaggeration. Then a joke. Ashley started calling my EpiPen my drama pen. My parents sighed whenever I asked what was in a dish. I was being difficult. I was making everything about myself. I was, as always, too much. 6 months before the dinner that almost killed me, I started noticing something strange. After a family meal in June soup that Ashley had made, my throat felt tight. Not like the attack at 12, just uncomfortable. I mentioned it, and my mother's face hardened. Please don't make a scene. You know how sensitive Ashley gets when you criticize her cooking. At Thanksgiving, I felt the same tightness after Ashley's casserole. My father barely looked up. You probably ate too fast. Don't ruin the holiday. At Christmas, it happened again. Both parents sighed in unison. You always do this, Kristen. 3 incidents, 3 dismissals. The symptoms were mild, nothing like the childhood emergency, and the foods were different each time. I couldn't see a pattern. What I could see was my family's exhaustion with me. After 30 years of being told my instincts were wrong, I started to believe them. Maybe I was anxious. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I really was the dramatic one. That was my greatest mistake, trusting their judgment over my own body. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my grandfather's death had set something terrible in motion. Grandpa Henry passed 6 months before that fateful dinner. He was the only person in my family who ever made me feel seen. His estate was still in probate when I received an email from his attorney asking me to schedule a meeting. I assumed it was routine paperwork. Ashley knew better. She had visited our parents the month before and used our father's computer. She found the attorney's email with the full will attached. She read that Grandpa had left his house worth $800,000 solely to me. She read the contingency clause stating that if I was deceased before distribution, the proceeds would be split among the remaining grandchildren. And she read Grandpa's explanation, the words he wrote, to justify his choice. I leave this to Kristen because she is the only grandchild who never asked me for anything and who loved me for who I was, not for what I could give her. Those words weren't just a gift to me, they were a judgment on everyone else, and Ashley could never let the family hear them. When I walked into my parents' house that evening, I didn't know that someone had already read every word of Grandpa's will, including the explanation of why he chose me. I didn't know that explanation was something my sister could never let the world hear, and I didn't know that the person who would eventually save my life was at that moment still choosing not to see what was right in front of him. The dinner began with a lie dressed as warmth. The moment I stepped through my parents' front door, Ashley rushed toward me with open arms, pulling me into a hug she had never given before. She complimented my blouse, asked about my work, laughed at things I said that were not remotely funny. It felt wrong. Everything about that evening felt wrong. My parents seemed nervous in a way I could not quite name. They kept glancing at Ashley, making too much eye contact with her and not enough with me. Derek sat at the end of the table, quiet as always, but I noticed his eyes moving between his wife and me, like he was watching something unfold that he did not want to see. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have made an excuse and left. But 30 years of being told my instincts were wrong had done their work. I stayed. I smiled. I played the role of the grateful daughter who was just happy to be included. Ashley disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a large pot. She ladled creamy soup into bowls with theatrical care, placing the largest portion in front of me. "I made this special for you," she said, her voice sweet as honey, completely shellfish-free. "I know how careful you have to be." Something in my gut screamed no. The soup was pale and thick. I could not identify what was in it. I hesitated, my spoon hovering over the bowl, and then the familiar chorus began. My mother leaned forward with that disappointed look I knew so well. "Don't be paranoid, honey. Ashley worked hard on this." My father did not even look up from his own bowl. "Just eat. Don't make things awkward." Ashley's eyes filled with wounded tears. "I can't believe you still don't trust me, after everything I did to make this nice for you." 30 years. 30 years of being told I was dramatic, oversensitive, difficult. 30 years of being trained to doubt myself. I looked at my family, all of them waiting, and I felt the old shame rise in my chest. I did not want to be the problem. I did not want to ruin another family dinner. I picked up my spoon and took a bite. Across the table, I noticed something that did not register until later. Ashley was not eating her own soup. She was pushing it around her bowl, watching me with an expression I could not read. But I was too busy trying to prove I was not difficult to pay attention. Within minutes, I felt it. The familiar itch at the back of my throat, the tingling in my lips. My heart began to race, pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I set down my spoon, my hand trembling. "Something's wrong," I said, but my voice came out thin and strange. I reached for my purse, my fingers searching for the EpiPen I always carried. Always. It was my lifeline, my security, the thing that stood between me and death. My fingers found nothing. I dumped the contents of my purse onto the table, lipstick and keys and wallet scattering across the wood. No EpiPen. It was gone. My throat was tightening now, each breath harder than the last. I looked at my family, panic rising like a wave. "Call 911, I gasped. "Please, I can't breathe." And then came the response that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Ashley sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You're having a panic attack. You always do this." My mother reached over and patted my hand, her voice patient and patronizing. "Just breathe, sweetheart. You're working yourself up over nothing." My father did not even look concerned. "Don't overreact. You'll be fine in a minute." 3 people. 3 people watching me struggle to breathe, my lips swelling, my face flushing red, and all 3 of them telling me I was imagining it. The same words I had heard my whole life, the same dismissal, the same denial. But this time I was not being dramatic. This time I was not making everything about myself. This time I was dying right there at the dinner table, and my family was watching it happen while telling me it was all in my head. Derek had been silent through all of it. I had almost forgotten he was there. But something in him shifted as he watched my face change color. He saw what my family refused to see. He saw my lips turning blue. He saw the swelling spreading across my features. He excused himself quietly, slipping into the kitchen, while Ashley continued to assure everyone I was fine. I do not know exactly what he found there. I only know what he told me later. My EpiPen was in the trash can still in its case. Not lost, not misplaced. Deliberately thrown away. In that moment, Derek told me everything clicked into place. Every red flag he had ignored came crashing together. Ashley's casual comment months ago about how much simpler life would be if I was not around. Her obsessive questions about Grandpa's estate. The searches he had glimpsed on their shared computer searches about allergies and reactions and timing that he had told himself meant nothing. He had been a coward. He had chosen not to see, because seeing would have cost him everything. But standing in that kitchen holding my discarded EpiPen, he could not pretend anymore. He walked back into the dining room just as Ashley leaned close to me. She did not see him behind her. She thought she was safe. She thought she had won, and so she whispered something she never expected anyone else to hear. You always thought you were better than everyone. Grandpa thought you were special. Let's see how special you are when you can't breathe. Derek heard every word. His blood turned to ice. He told me later that in that moment he understood with perfect clarity that this was not negligence or carelessness or a mistake. This was murder. His wife was trying to murder me. Derek pulled out his phone. Ashley's head snapped toward him. What are you doing? Her voice was sharp, dangerous. He ignored her. He dialed 911 and spoke clearly into the phone. I need an ambulance and police. My sister-in-law is having a severe allergic reaction. I believe someone deliberately poisoned her food. Yes, I need police too. Please hurry. He gave the address while Ashley screamed at him that I was fine, that I was being dramatic, that he was overreacting just like I always did. But Derek was already running out the front door, sprinting to my car parked in the driveway. I had told him once years ago at a family barbecue that I kept a backup EpiPen in my glove compartment. He thought it was paranoid at the time. Now it saved my life. He found it, ran back inside, and jabbed the needle into my thigh just as the sirens filled the street. Paramedics rushed through the door. A police officer dispatched because Derek had specifically requested one began asking questions. Derek pointed toward the kitchen, his voice steady despite everything. Her EpiPen is in the trash. She didn't throw it away. Check the trash. Ashley began to cry, loud and theatrical, the performance of a devastated sister who could not understand what was happening. But Derek had spent 5 years watching his wife cry on command. He knew the difference between her real tears and her fake ones. This time he noticed the tears did not reach her eyes. In the ambulance, hovering somewhere between consciousness and darkness, I heard fragments of the world around me. Derek's voice firm and clear saying, "Not an accident," to someone I could not see. A police radio crackling with codes I did not understand. Ashley's theatrical sobbing growing distant as the ambulance pulled away. And lying there fighting to breathe, fighting to stay alive, I finally understood the truth. The family I had spent 35 years protecting had just tried to kill me. Not all of them held the spoon, but none of them reached for the phone. I woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later, my throat raw from the breathing tube they had removed while I slept. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of machines monitoring my heart. For a moment, I did not remember how I got there. Then it all came rushing back. The soup, the swelling, the way my family watched me choke and told me I was imagining it, the way none of them reached for the phone. A nurse noticed I was awake and left to get the doctor. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside me. For 35 years I had been the daughter who kept the peace, who doubted herself, who accepted whatever scraps of acknowledgement my family offered. That daughter died at that dinner table. Whoever I was now, she was done being quiet. The doctor arrived within the hour. She explained that I had experienced severe anaphylactic shock, that the paramedics arrived just in time, that I was lucky to be alive. Then she sat down beside my bed, and her expression grew serious. Ms. Bailey, the shellfish concentration in your system was massive, far beyond accidental cross-contamination. This was a significant amount of shellfish protein deliberately introduced into whatever you consumed. I nodded slowly. I had already suspected as much, but she was not finished. She pulled up my medical records on her tablet and turned the screen toward me. You've had 3 emergency room visits in the past 6 months for mild allergic reactions. Each time shellfish protein was detected in your blood work. The levels increased with each visit, 12 units in June, 18 units in November. 25 units in December. Last night was 89 units. She paused. I'm required to report these findings to the detective assigned to your case. The pattern suggests this wasn't a single incident. I stared at those numbers and felt my entire understanding of the past 6 months collapse and rebuild itself. June. Ashley's soup. November. Ashley's Thanksgiving casserole. December. Ashley's Christmas appetizers. Each time I mentioned feeling unwell. Each time my family told me I was being dramatic. I was not imagining anything. I was being tested. My sister had been poisoning me for months, carefully increasing the dose, watching to see how much I could tolerate before my body gave out. I did not wait for answers to come to me. As soon as the doctor left, I asked the nurse for my phone and called my grandfather's attorney directly. My voice was still hoarse, but I made myself clear. I need to know the exact contents of my grandfather's will, all of it. The attorney hesitated, then agreed. What he told me completed the picture. Grandpa Henry had left his house to me alone. The property was valued at $800,000. But there was more. The will contained a specific contingency clause. If I was deceased or unable to claim the inheritance at the time of distribution, the property would be sold and proceeds divided equally among the remaining grandchildren. Ashley knew. She must have found out somehow, and she knew that if I died before the estate was settled, she would get her share. But the attorney was not finished. He told me Grandpa had included a written explanation for his decision recorded as part of the official will. He read it to me over the phone, and I had to press my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing. I leave this to Kristen, because she is the only grandchild who never asked me for anything and who loved me for who I was, not for what I could give her. Grandpa saw me. He always saw me. And Ashley tried to kill me to make sure no one else would ever hear those words. Derek came to visit that afternoon. He looked exhausted, like he had not slept since the dinner. He told me he had been staying at a hotel because he could not bring himself to go home, could not look at Ashley. He sat beside my bed and told me everything he had given to the police. As an IT professional, Derek knew something Ashley did not. Deleting browser history is not enough. Router logs preserve records of every website visited. Google accounts sync across devices. Cloud backups store information even after you think you have erased it. He guided the forensic team through Ashley's digital footprint, helping them recover everything she thought she had destroyed. The searches dated back 3 weeks before the dinner. Shellfish allergy lethal dose. How long until anaphylaxis is fatal? Can allergic reaction look like heart attack? EpiPen delay death time. How much shrimp powder is undetectable? My sister did not act on impulse. She researched. She planned. She optimized for murder. Derek's voice broke as he apologized. He said he had seen warning signs for months but chose to ignore them because confronting the truth would have cost him everything. I looked at this man who had finally done the right thing when it mattered most and told him that his cowardice nearly cost me my life, but his courage saved it. We would both have to live with that. My parents arrived that evening, and I knew from the moment they walked in that they had not come to comfort me. They had come to manage me. My mother's eyes were red, but the first words out of her mouth were not about my health or how close they came to losing me. This needs to stay in the family, she said. Ashley made a terrible mistake, but she's still your sister. We can work through this privately. I looked at my parents with new eyes. These were not people who had failed to protect me through ignorance. These were people who had chosen again and again to sacrifice my well-being for Ashley's comfort. A mistake is forgetting an ingredient, I said slowly. Ashley spent 3 weeks researching how to kill me. She tested doses on me 3 times while you told me I was being dramatic. She stole my EpiPen and watched me choke while telling everyone I was having a panic attack. My mother started crying harder. My father stepped forward. If you press charges, you'll destroy this family. I felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. You watched me struggle to breathe at 3 separate dinners. You told me to stop making a fuss. You chose Ashley's feelings over my life, not once, not twice, but over and over for 30 years. I didn't destroy this family. You did. You just didn't notice because I was the only one paying the price. I asked them to leave. They stood there stunned, as if they could not believe I was finally refusing to play my role. Then they left, and I called the detective. I provided a complete statement covering everything. The 3 previous incidents, the escalating pattern in my medical records, the inheritance motive, the digital evidence Derek had uncovered. Ashley was arrested that evening at my parents' house, still insisting it was all a misunderstanding. When Ashley was led to the police car in handcuffs, she was still crying, performing shock and betrayal for anyone who would watch. She had no idea that her husband had already handed over her laptop, her search history, and his testimony. The person she trusted most had become the witness who would end her, and the trial had not even begun. The months between Ashley's arrest and her trial were strange and quiet. I returned to work, moved through my days, attended therapy sessions to process what had happened to me. I tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy while knowing that a courtroom battle was coming. Meanwhile, Ashley was out on bail, staying with our parents, and she spent those months doing what she had always done best, controlling the narrative. Her attorney had given her hope. First-time offender, no prior criminal record, sympathetic presentation. He told her they could work with that. He told her that juries respond to emotion, to vulnerability, to a well-dressed woman who cries at the right moments. And Ashley, who had never faced a real consequence in her entire 32 years of life, believed him completely. She had always talked her way out of everything. She had always found someone to blame, someone to rescue her, someone to make the problem disappear. She did not understand that attempted murder is not a problem that disappears. She started posting on social media about false accusations and family jealousy. She crafted long, emotional posts about how her own sister had turned against her over an inheritance dispute. She told friends and neighbors that I was mentally unstable, that I had always been dramatic and attention-seeking, that I was trying to destroy her out of spite because Grandpa chose to leave me his house. She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive older sister who could not stand to see her happy. Some people believed her. Ashley had always been charming. She knew exactly how to make herself look innocent, how to tilt her head and widen her eyes, and make her voice tremble at just the right moment. She began talking openly about what she would do when this was over, the trips she would take to recover from the trauma, the fresh start she would make once her name was cleared. She truly believed she would walk away from this. She had spent her whole life walking away from the messes she created while other people cleaned up behind her. She did not understand that this time was different. This time there was evidence that could not be explained away. This time there was a witness who would not stay silent. This time, the person she had spent 5 years manipulating had finally stopped protecting her. The trial lasted 4 days. I sat in the courtroom every single day, watching the prosecution lay out what my sister had done to me. They presented the evidence, methodically building their case piece by piece until the picture was undeniable. The Google searches dating back 3 weeks before the dinner, showing that Ashley had researched lethal doses and reaction times and how to make an allergic death look like a heart attack. The medical records documenting 3 previous emergency room visits over 6 months, each showing increasing levels of shellfish protein in my blood, each corresponding to a meal Ashley had prepared. The EpiPen found in the trash can, still in its case, proof that she had deliberately removed my only means of survival. And then Derek took the stand. He described what he had witnessed that night with steady, unflinching detail. The soup Ashley refused to eat herself, the way she rolled her eyes while I struggled to breathe, the EpiPen he found discarded in the kitchen trash, and the words she whispered to me when she thought no one could hear. "You always thought you were better than everyone. Let's see how special you are when you can't breathe." I watched Ashley's face as her husband testified against her. I watched the mask slip just for a moment, and I saw the rage underneath. Ashley's attorney tried his best to salvage the situation. He painted the whole thing as a tragic accident, a sister who simply forgot about an allergy she had known about for over 20 years. He suggested that the Google searches were just idle curiosity, that the previous incidents were unfortunate coincidence, that Derek was a bitter husband looking for an excuse to end his marriage. He put Ashley on the stand and let her cry, let her talk about how much she loved me, how she would never intentionally hurt anyone. She was convincing. I will give her that. She had been practicing that performance her whole life. It might have worked. Juries can be unpredictable, and Ashley still looked beautiful and fragile, sitting there in her modest dress with tears streaming down her face. It might have worked until the prosecution read Grandpa Henry's will explanation aloud. The prosecutor stood before the jury and read the words my grandfather had written, the words he wanted preserved as part of his official last testament. I leave this to Kristen because she is the only grandchild who never asked me for anything and who loved me for who I was, not for what I could give her." The courtroom was silent. I held my breath, and then Ashley exploded. She shot to her feet before anyone could stop her. Her face twisted with a rage I had never seen her show in public. "That's a lie!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the courtroom walls. The bailiff moved toward her, but she kept going, unable to stop herself. "I was his favorite. I was always the favorite. She manipulated him. She manipulated everyone." The bailiff grabbed her arm and pulled her back down into her seat. Her attorney dropped his head into his hands, and I could see his shoulders slump in defeat. The judge stared at her with undisguised contempt. The jury stared at her with something far more damaging understanding. In 15 seconds of uncontrolled rage, Ashley had shown the courtroom exactly who she was. Not a grieving sister who made a tragic mistake, not an innocent woman caught up in a terrible misunderstanding. A narcissist who could not bear the thought of not being chosen. A woman so consumed by her need to be the favorite that she would kill her own sister rather than let anyone hear that she was not. The defense's entire narrative collapsed in real time. The verdict came back guilty. Assault in the first degree. The judge took a long moment to review the evidence before delivering the sentence. She spoke about the premeditation demonstrated by weeks of careful research. She spoke about the pattern of test doses documented in medical records. She spoke about the deliberate removal of life-saving medication. And she spoke about the defendant's complete lack of remorse demonstrated by her outburst in this very courtroom. The sentence, 5 years in state prison followed by 5 years of supervised probation, a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with me, and $100,000 in restitution. Ashley screamed that it was unfair. The judge looked at her with cold eyes and responded in a voice that silenced every whisper in the room. "Ms. Morrison, you spent 3 weeks researching how to kill your sister. You poisoned her 3 times to calibrate the correct dose. You stole her medication and watched her suffocate while telling everyone she was being dramatic. The only reason this is not a murder trial is because someone in that room had more conscience than you. 5 years is mercy. Use them to find whatever humanity you have left." Ashley was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about injustice. Some people never learn. Some people are incapable of learning. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Derek's divorce was finalized 3 months after the conviction. The family court judge, presented with evidence that Ashley had attempted to murder a family member, awarded Derek full custody of their 4-year-old son. Ashley would receive only supervised visitation after her release, and only if she completed court-mandated psychological evaluation, maintained stable housing, and received professional recommendation that visits would not harm the child. The State Real Estate Board revoked her license permanently. Felony convictions involving moral turpitude disqualify licensees from the profession, and attempted murder of your own sister certainly qualifies. Her social media accounts went silent as followers disappeared overnight. Former friends posted public statements about how shocked they were, how they never really knew her, how they could not believe they had been fooled. Her parents, who had spent a significant portion of their retirement savings on her legal defense, found themselves financially strained and socially isolated. Their church community quietly stepped back. Old friends stopped returning calls. The family that had produced a would-be murderer and the parents who had enabled her for 32 years became people others preferred to avoid. Ashley entered state prison with nothing. No husband, no child, no career, no savings, no reputation, no one waiting for her on the other side. The identity she had spent her entire life constructing, the special one, the chosen one, the favorite, no longer existed. She had destroyed it herself with her own hands in front of 12 strangers who saw through her charm in a way her family never could. On the day Ashley was processed into prison, I received a letter from her. 4 pages of blame, denial, and self-pity. She wrote about how unfair the trial had been, how Derek had betrayed her trust, how our parents had failed to protect her, how I had somehow orchestrated this entire situation to steal what should have been hers. Not one word of genuine remorse, not one acknowledgement of what she had done to me. I did not finish reading it. I had spent 35 years absorbing her grievances, making myself smaller so she could feel bigger. I was done. What I did not expect was another letter waiting for me. One that had been hidden for months, written by hands that actually loved me. waiting in the house I was finally ready to claim. The house had been waiting for me. Grandpa Henry's house, now legally mine, stood quiet and full of memories when I finally moved in 3 months after the trial. I spent weeks going through his belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to treasure. Every drawer and closet held pieces of old photographs, handwritten recipes, books with margins full of his neat handwriting. I took my time. There was no rush anymore. No one was telling me to hurry up or stop being sentimental. It was in his favorite reading chair that I found it. Tucked inside a worn copy of his favorite book, an envelope with my name written in his familiar hand. The letter inside was dated 1 month before his death, when he knew his health was failing. "My dear Kristen," it began, "I've watched our family for many years, and I've seen how they've treated you. I couldn't change them while I was alive. I tried and I failed, and I'm sorry for that. But I could make sure you had something that was entirely yours. This house isn't just property. It's my way of saying what I should have said louder. You were never invisible to me. You were never too sensitive or too dramatic or too much. You were the best of all of us, not because you achieved the most, but because you loved the most, honestly. You deserve better than what they gave you. Go build the life they never let you have. With all my love, Grandpa." I sat in his reading chair and cried. Not from grief this time, from being seen. Finally, completely, undeniably seen. Someone in my family had understood. Someone had loved me exactly as I was. 2 years have passed since that dinner. 2 years since I nearly died at my family's table while they told me I was imagining things. In that time, I have built a life I never knew I was allowed to want. My real family has taken shape around me, and it looks nothing like the one I was born into. It is made of colleagues who visited me in the hospital and never stopped checking in. Friends who showed up when blood relatives disappeared. Derek is part of that family now, too. His divorce from Ashley was finalized, and he has full custody of their son. He brings the boy to visit me once a month. My nephew, 4 years old when this all began, and now 6, finally knows his Aunt Kristen. He knows my laugh, my cooking, my bedtime stories. The relationship Ashley tried so hard to prevent is flourishing without her. I host dinners in Grandpa's renovated dining room now. The table holds people who chose me, people I chose back. There is laughter without performance support, without conditions, love without keeping score. No one at my table has ever told me I was being dramatic. I finally understand what family was supposed to feel like. It was never about blood. It was about being seen and accepted and valued exactly as you are. My parents reached out after the trial. The public shame and community isolation shook them in ways Ashley's arrest alone had not. Their church friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided them. Their retirement savings were depleted by legal fees. They wrote asking if we could talk. I agreed not because I forgave them, but because I wanted to see if they were capable of change. We meet twice a year now at a neutral restaurant with clear rules. No mention of Ashley. No minimizing what happened. No asking when I will move on. The first meeting was painful. My mother cried through most of it. My father, for the first time in my life, said, "We failed you. We failed you your whole life. I don't know if we can fix it, but I want to try." I did not tell him it was okay, because it was not okay. What I said was, "I'm willing to see who you become, slowly, on my terms. I give them exactly as much as I choose. Not a drop more." 2 years after her sentencing, another letter arrived from Ashley. Her handwriting was still precise even on prison stationery. "Kristen, I know I can never undo what I did. I've lost everything. I just need you to know I'm sorry. Please write back." I read the letter twice. I waited for anger or satisfaction or something. What I felt was clarity. This letter was not about me. It was about Ashley needing attention, response proof that she still mattered. Even from prison, she was still trying to take from me. I put the letter in a drawer unanswered. Forgiveness is not something I owe her. My silence is not cruelty. It is the boundary I finally learned to hold. Some doors once closed, stay closed. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. I am sitting in Grandpa's reading chair as I finish telling you this story. Through the window, I can see the garden he planted blooming again after 2 years of my care. His letter is framed on my desk. Not because I need a reminder that I mattered to him, but because I want visitors to know that someone in my family saw me clearly. Someone chose me. I think about who I was before that dinner, a woman who spent 35 years making herself small so others could feel big. A woman who trusted her family's judgment over her own body. A woman who nearly died because she had been trained to doubt herself. I think about who I am now, someone who survived, spoke the truth, and rebuilt her life on the foundation of finally knowing her own worth. If you are listening to this and something feels familiar, if you are the eldest daughter who always had to be responsible, the sister who was told she was too sensitive, the woman who kept the peace at the cost of her own voice, I want you to know something important. Your instincts are not dramatic. Your boundaries are not selfish. Your needs are not inconvenient. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not protecting you. They are protecting themselves from having to see you clearly. You do not need permission to protect yourself. You do not have to nearly die to earn the right to be believed. And family. Real family never asks you to choose between belonging and breathing. Grandpa saw me when no one else did. But here is what took me 35 years to learn. I do not need anyone to see me anymore. I see myself now, and I will never be invisible again. Thank you for staying with me through Kristen's entire journey. Her story carries lessons that I hope will stay with you long after this video ends. First, trust your instincts. If your body tells you something is wrong, listen to it. No one knows your body better than you do, and anyone who dismisses your concerns is not protecting you. Second, boundaries are not betrayal. Kristen spent 35 years believing that keeping the peace meant sacrificing her own well-being. She nearly died for that belief. Setting boundaries with family is not selfish, it is survival. Third blood does not equal family. The people who truly love you are the ones who see you clearly, support you unconditionally, and never ask you to shrink yourself for their comfort. Sometimes those people share your DNA. Sometimes they do not. And finally, it is never too late to reclaim your voice. Kristen was 35 when she finally stopped doubting herself. Whether you are 35 or 55 or 75, you deserve to be heard. You deserve to be believed. You deserve to take up space in your own life. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own experiences, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are worthy of love that does not hurt.